Okay, board members, we're going to move on to 4.5. We got Donna Smith with us here for the athletic training review, and Donna's going to introduce her special guest tonight. And just for whatever it's worth, Dr. Burrows, it's really nice to see you again, and thank you for all that you do for us. So, Donna, go ahead.
We're very excited to come forward to you tonight because we know how much our district really values community partnerships, and we truly believe this is one of our strong community partnerships. Actually originated in 2011, so this is actually the second year of a review of this. And this partnership came at a really intense time for our district. We were just getting ready to go into this economic, I don't know the word, down slump, or if that's a true word or not. But what that was meaning, we were trying to figure out where we're going to find the money to cover all the positions we have. And we were so fortunate that we were approached by the hospital to say, we can help you out in one area, and that area is athletic training. And since it is a medical area, what better area to assist us than the hospital? So the actual agreement that the board has entered into was with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Hospital Authority. And technically we consider that our partner is the Carolinas healthcare system at Northeast, because that's where our relationship is formed. But just to let you know, this agreement provided athletic training services at the high school level, and we currently have one hospital-employed athletic trainer at each of our high schools. We also receive the clinical oversight of these athletic training services, and we're recognized, in case you don't know, as one of the model programs for sports medicine in the state of North Carolina. You can't be in an audience very long until the state leaders say, look at Cabarrus. And we attribute a lot of that to Scott Behringer, who originated the program here. But I'd like to invite Scott Behringer to come forward. He's technically the manager of athletic training and sports medicine with Carolinas Healthcare System Northeast. We have Dr. Kevin Burrows, who we regard as our sports medicine medical director, who can bring you up to date in terms of what all has been accomplished in the area of athletic training. And while I mention the high school, let me do a commercial interruption. The hospital values the relationship of athletic training services at the high school level. While they do not fund any positions at the middle school, we have to quickly say they help support the athletic training program there by giving us some oversight. So we are grateful for that. You want to come forward? And you have before you the review.
Do a dance.
Thank you and good evening. Glad to be here for y'all tonight. Okay. And I think if you've got questions, feel free to ask. I think there were some questions earlier. You'll see in the report, we do value the partnership with Cabarrus County Schools and feel it's a strong partnership. And very pleased and proud to have Dr. Burrows serving as our medical director with the hospital and the school system in the sports medicine department. He's been very instrumental since he came here 7, 8 years ago.
10 now, thank you.
10 now, okay. Time flies.
Time flies.
He's worked very, very closely with us to implement a lot of programs that we put in place here in the last 10 years. Not only that, he and I both serve on the North Carolina High School Athletic Association Sports Medicine Advisory Committee for the state association, which we help make guidelines and rules and regulations for the State Athletic Association, as well as the North Carolina Medical Society Sports Medicine Committee Board. We both serve on that. And also, we're very instrumental in working with the legislation on the Gefeller-Waller law. I served on that panel with Dr. Burrows as well to do that. So I'll let Dr. Burrows.
So you see before you basically the yearly report. In our previous times, we've been asked to come down with more of a bullet point kind of a format, which is what we had tried to accomplish for you this year. You can see that our work with the school system really extends beyond just our stated agreement as what it is. There was a donation of over $20,000 worth of fitness equipment to various schools. This was some of the surplus equipment that was from the hospital system that we were able to find new homes for in our school system. Additionally, the 3 high schools received equipment of $4,000 for an E-stem ultrasound machine. A question was brought up by one of the members in regards to in regards to the equipment problems. Basically, it was just outdated equipment is what it was, and so this was an opportunity for us to make sure that the athletic trainers at all of the high schools were on par so that we were able to provide equal medical treatment at each one of the schools that are there. All of them received a portable treatment table. The high schools, and I won't read through the rest of it there, but in total, That ends up being about another $26,000 worth of basically in-kind, or not in-kind, but direct gifts from the hospital system as well to the schools throughout the county in areas of need, and to make sure that we're on par throughout the school system, that everybody's receiving equal amounts or equal opportunities at medical treatments. The numbers that you see there, game numbers, treatments, games covered, athlete treatments covered. There were a few questions that were outlined again that we had received ahead of time. And one of them was about the number of games covered and treatments. And as you can see, it's amazing when you start looking at the number of high schools that we have and the number of high school athletes that we have. So we have, roughly speaking, around 5,000 student athletes that are in part of our school system every year. That's a lot of people. And then when you start looking at the numbers of teams, 28 teams at each high school, you start multiplying that out. You got over 190 teams in the Cabarrus County school system throughout the course of the year that are needing coverage. That's quite a lot of kids that are out there participating in lots of different venues and lots of different events. I was trying to make sure to touch on these points that we've been given ahead of time. One of the things that was brought up was a concern about the concussions. And if you'll see on there, our concussion numbers did go up. Had 219 concussions that were evaluated, and this is just those that were reported through the athletic training staff that are there. And that's a large number, but you're absolutely right, and it's a number that we have seen. It's not just here. It's across the nation, and you see everybody's seeing that the NFL and other aspects of sports are really paying a lot more attention to concussion. Question is, are there that many more concussions? I'll have patients or parents come in all the time. Well, we had concussions when I was growing up, and you rubbed some dirt on it, it came back in. Well, we know a little better now than we did at that point in time as well. But the question is, are there more concussions, or are we just better at detecting exactly what a concussion is, and are we doing a better job of trying to manage those? And I think that latter statement is probably a little bit more of the correct answer that's there. What we do see, and I've seen in the kids that I've taken care of, we're seeing a lot of these kids that are being impacted not just on the athletic field. And these are not just athletes that we're seeing with concussions. We are seeing these from PE classes. We are seeing these from kids that fall at home. And one of the big issues there is, what do you do for those kids when they come back? How do we manage academic accommodations for that? And we have joined together with Donna and the rest of her staff, and we are trying to come with a return to learn program for all of our student athletes in Cabarrus County. So there will be a defined way that the kid returning back to school is allowed to re-enter into the academic venue to make sure that we are making the appropriate accommodations for these kids. We're in the process right now. We've sectioned out this and tried to come up with a more formal kind of a program, and we hope to have that done within the next couple of weeks, but hopefully even before the start of school. We've already put some things in place. Whenever a child's diagnosed with a concussion, they return to school with a form. That form gets forwarded to the school nurses. It also goes to a principal so that they are made aware of that being in the school for them. And we are really trying to work together as a partnership of the medical community as well as the school system to make sure that these kids are handled in the correct fashion and the appropriate accommodations are made. So that was one of the other big issues that was bringing up in there.
Along with that, Dr. Burrow's office provides the impact testing for all Cabarrus County middle schools as well. With the high schools, it's funded. We do the impact testing to get a baseline on the athletes. And if they have a concussion, then they go back in and have a post-test done to see the difference in there, and that's where a lot of diagnosis of his information comes from. But his office does provide the funding for that testing, which was not on the report as well.
Yeah,
that's a yearly thing that's been done for the last
6 years at least. Yeah. So, and we do that both. We do it for middle school as well as high school as well. Even though the agreement again is with our high schools as far as the funding of the athletic trainers, that doesn't stop there. We consider all of the sports medicine community of the Cabarrus County schools as one central unit, and that's how we try to help to manage and oversee that. So without going into any more, I'll let you guys look over that, but if there are any questions or additional questions that weren't answered, I'd be happy to try to field those for you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Wonderful report, and it's like Donna said in the very beginning, there's no better partnership than the partnership with the hospital that you guys have afforded us, and both of you guys are well credentialed and provide tremendous support to Cabarrus County Schools, and I, for one, appreciate all that you've done. Board members, do you have any questions that you'd like to address to these gentlemen? Because now you've had this report, you've had a chance to review it, and some of the numbers really, are, it's just amazing to me. But when you think about the number of teams and the number of athletes and all of that, well, I guess it sort of all gets put into perspective when you look at it like that. 5,000 athletes. But anyway, we'll start on Mr. Phillips' side. If you have questions, we'll get them. If not, we'll move on.
I don't really have any questions. I just have praise. I'm particularly pleased to see that you've got the cold water immersion tubs that are now available for all the high schools, and that you're working on the tents for the heat-related illnesses. I am sure that there will be some news report in the next 3 months of a heat-related death.
We just had a death.
Not from our school district, but somewhere around the country, and they are totally preventable. And I'm glad you're making sure that it's not going to happen in Cabarrus County.
There was a death in Fayetteville Saturday morning with a high school junior. The cause of death has not been determined yet. I think it's a cardiac issue, but it did occur this past Saturday.
And I would like to point out that the partnership that we have also with the Northeast Foundation, which is separate from the hospital and the entity which we did, Scott and I approached the foundation about the cold water immersion tubs, looking for a resource. And they are the ones who actually provided the funding for the cold water immersion tubs, as well as we are getting the tents to put over those tubs so that they don't, otherwise you have a tub of hot water by the end of the practice. So we are going to be able to do that, and that is being afforded by the foundation.
Yeah, I got word today that the logo, we're working on the logo for that the tents will be ordered this week, hopefully, for all 14 schools, not just high schools.
Yeah, middle schools as well.
Middle and
again.
high schools.
Yeah. And I also applaud the seriousness with which you're addressing the concussion issue. I have 3 student athletes that have been in the programs at Cabarrus County Schools, and I know that they have to go and get the baseline tests, and I think that's absolutely the right thing to do. And I would just say that if you ever get any pressure from a school official to bend the line a little bit to allow us athlete to return to the game when he shouldn't, you know that there's 7 people up here that are going to back you 100%.
Well, we appreciate that. And actually, that does bring me, there was one other question, if it's okay, Mr. Chair, is that the question was about, well, who's in charge of returning? And this is something that we fielded at the very beginning when we first started this relationship as well. And is it up to the coach or anything? Coaches actually, we have gone and done education for the PE teachers, for the coaches, for everyone else. Coaches actually are helping with reporting of the concussions at this point. They are not responsible, and they cannot make that decision on the field. It has to be according to the Gefeller-Waller law, the state law, if someone is being designated as suspicion of concussion, they have to be removed from the game at that point in time, and they cannot be returned to any athletic participation until after being cleared by a medical professional. And a medical professional is outlined within the law statute. But Scott's got the specific numbers by school, but surprisingly to us, there has been a number of that has really come from the coaches, have been helping us to identify these players. So there is education, and there is more awareness than what there has been in the past, so which is great. It's wonderful to have. And again, a partnership with them and helping us to keep these kids safe.
Absolutely great. That's going like that. That's great. Mr. Harrison, do you have any comments?
Just to say the obvious, that when a student athlete suffers that kind of condition, it's just heartbreaking and heart-wrenching to parents and all the aspirations. And you're doing a great public service, community service, to provide these facilities and this equipment to us. I commend you, and deeply and profoundly am grateful for your involvement. This is not a question for Donna Smith, but at some point in time, it might be appropriate to give us a review of the training or the certification that our staff might have ahead of them in the use of or the application of these services and equipment pieces, so that we can be reassured, of course, that they can use the equipment rapidly to address a condition. And that's in the near future, if you'd like to consider that, please.
Together on that.
Thank you. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Walden?
I was probably one of the ones that asked most of the questions on that. As new to the board, 4 of us are new to the board, and I've got 2 kids that are getting into that age group. So this is the first exposure I've gotten to these kind of numbers. And it was kind of surprising or shocking to me, I guess, that we had 22,301 treatments, which I didn't know exactly what that was. It was explained to us that I guess that could be anything from wrapping of knees to actual injuries. I was
Putting a Band-Aid on or whatever.
I was under the assumption that maybe it was an injury of that nature, but 219 concussions was a lot, I think. And I guess my question to the board here, like Jeff was saying, do we need a board policy on concussion management? Just that kind of condenses the rules, the procedures that you're doing, just to back you all up.
We actually, it's fine to come up with a board. I've worked with Kannapolis City Schools as well on their aspect, but really as far as it would suffice you to, at this point, make reference to the Gefeller-Waller, which is actually a state law. So that would cover.
Is there anything more that we can be doing? Or
that's part of the return to learn, which we will enact.
I like that.
And hopefully, if we wanted to incorporate that into a policy per se, we would be more than happy to work with you on that as soon as we can get that completely developed.
Okay. But again, as a parent, the safety of our kids, and if you've got a concussion, especially a repeat concussion, that takes kids out of the classroom for quite some time, or could potentially. So those were my comments. I thank you for your report.
Thank you.
And for the
Mr.
partnership.
Waldron. Okay, thank you, Mr. Waldron. Mr. Kiger?
Yes, thank you, guys. And I'm going to, just very quickly, Donna touched on it, and I talked to Mr. Tyson today, and he said the same thing, that we're a model. And people want to know what Cabarrus County's doing and how we're doing it. And I'm appreciative to both of you for putting us in that position where we can be a leader statewide. So, and we strive to do that, whatever we're doing, whether it's academics or athletics, we need to be the best. And you guys are helping provide that leadership. So I greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kiger. Ms. Carpenter, you have any comments?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you. And I can say I was here when it started, and I think it was a great project, and I want to thank the foundation. And I just want to clarify, I know we're in the high schools. Didn't you say we're in the middle schools, or are we in the middle schools?
For the athletic trainers, no, ma'am.
Now, what would it take for us to nudge you over there? Or is this something we're looking at? What would it take for us to do this?
After hearing the discussion, 2 instances prior that were on the docket this evening, I think that would be a very difficult thing to do at this point.
Oh, come on, please. Pretty please.
Even with sugar on top.
Even with sugar on top, we don't have that many. But, I mean, is this something that we could maybe look at in the future? We don't have that many, really.
Well,
but, I mean, I didn't know if that was something that we could maybe work towards, or is this even been talked about?
it's considered. It's one of the challenges as a couple years ago when we started this, if you'll remember kind of what the budgetary offset was for the school system of having these individuals become employed through our system. There has to be a balance of that offset, and certainly I can't speak completely on behalf of the funding from the hospital administration aspect. But we would certainly be willing to have conversations in regards to that, to come up with some realistic numbers and what would that mean for both sides of the equation.
But if we could maybe keep those doors open, because it has been something, I mean, when it comes to safety of the children and for the future. And like I say, I would like to see those doors maybe open. Cabarrus County has always been the forefront when we looked at our nurses program. We were the first in the state to have nurses in all our schools. And that has been such a I mean, we've caught so many things in the health area, and sometimes that's the only doctor medicine that some of these children have ever had, and that was a first. This, I think, has been a first. Concussions, myself suffering brain injury at one time, know how important this is. Sometimes life and death can depend on it. These tubs we're talking about, life and death. So hopefully maybe this can open the door. I hope we will look at this. Okay. And again, thank you, thank the foundation, and thank y'all for what you do.
One comment. We were the first in the state in Cabarrus County to have certified athletic trainers at every middle school that's funded by the school system. Mm-hmm. So when I go to meetings, and I was just at a national meeting 3 weeks ago and serve on a council, because I am the president of the North Carolina Athletic Trainers Association, so I meet with all the presidents from all 50 states, and that's one thing we talked about, and people looked at me and said, middle school athletic trainers, how in the world do y'all do that? I said, well, our school board was committed several years ago to fund the position, the supplement to put these people there. And I said, so, we said, that's unusual and odd. I said, well, we're here for the health care of the kids. You can get injury at the middle school just like you can a catastrophic injury at the high school. So we are up there with the middle school, but the funding aspect's a little different.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carpenter. Mr. Shoemaker, do you have any comments, questions?
I'll keep them brief. Thank you again. As everyone has voiced, the importance and safety of our children is paramount. I know that when we first introduced the program, I've been coaching it as an assistant coach at Hickory Ridge and thinking swimmers have to go to concussion training. That was the first, several years ago, because you just don't think of swimmers having concussions. But this year we had a very severe concussion of one of our swimmers who hit the wall very hard. Not our swimmer, but one from Cox Mill, and it took a long time for that young lady to recover. And you guys are a real important piece of that. Also, I would say that our coaches are probably better trained now than they've ever been trained. There's a whole process that we have to go through, even as a lowly assistant coach that gets no pay. You still have to go through this ordeal of training to become a coach and to learn about a lot of things, and this exposes you to the risks of concussions, just to keep it on subject. And Dr. Burris, you got what you've done not only for our county, but I know that you're involved with the high schools throughout the state, and we just really appreciate what you're bringing to us, the level of professionalism. You and Scott now are really generating, and Brian, the coaches are prepared and they're there, and that's extremely important. One little thing. Now, if you just kind of find a way to help us at the swimming pool level, because we are off-site, so we don't really get the same advantages of the on-site folks. So find a way to integrate us into your plan, because there are a number of swimmers in this county that don't really see the trainers. But we do use your training services when we do have issues.
That's cool, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, board members, for all your comments and questions and everything. And Dr. Burris and Scott and Brian, thank you so much, for all you do. Once again, I can't reiterate that enough. But anyway, I guess we'll look forward to seeing you sometime next year with a better report.
Okay.
Hopefully less injuries, though.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks again. Okay, board members, we're going to move on to the last item on our report section tonight, and Donna Smith's at the podium. She's going to give us some good news about the Scholarship Plus for 2013. So, Donna, when you're ready.
Okay. I'm actually going to do a fairly quick report as you look ahead, because we've talked a bit about scholarships. I wanted to introduce that Scholarship Plus is actually a piece of software, and this is something all of our schools help bring to us. I want to take the mystery out of that title. But to tell you, we are very pleased with our results this year. It concerns us sometimes when we're pleased, because our bar gets set here and we have to keep the bar higher and higher. But in times where the dollars are fewer, we seem to be growing in scholarships. And so at the beginning or at the end, I'll actually speak to where I think some of this may be coming from. But just to review a little bit with you in terms of the change between this year and last year, you'll see on the slide in front of you, as we look to 917 academic scholarships given this year. The previous year it was at 699. So we had a change of about 218 scholarships in that one area. In terms of the athletic, the previous year we were at 57, so we had a change of 5. So this year we had a number of awarded scholarships would be 979 scholarships compared to actually 756 of the previous year. So we salute that and think that's a good step. We also will see that the dollar amount has changed pretty significantly as we look at that. And the next slide will show you how we've increased since 2009. And actually, as we prepared the slide this year, we needed to move out 2 years so we could have plenty of space. We like the shape of that line. We think that line is very reflective of the good work that's going on. But the piece that will kind of help make this make sense in terms of the increased dollars, we'll be looking at this next graph, which shows us the dollar amounts where we're making growth. And what I mean making growth, it's rare that you get the top column. You're looking at full military rides and several other things to be in that top column. And you'll find we continue to have some this year. But our growth seems to be more in the $50,000 to $100,000 range, the $25,000 to $50,000 range, and then also the $10,000 to $25,000, and particularly when you look at the $25 to the $1,000 range. Those are our growth areas. And we always try, particularly when groups approach us as to wanting to offer scholarships, many will say, well, we only have this amount of money. But we really feel strongly in Cabarrus, $25 scholarship, that's good. And in our minds, while that may not be a $500,000 ship, those $25 add and add and add. And we appreciate so much the community support that comes out of that. The next slide will reflect this percentage by school. And really, the enrollment at a school helps dictate to a degree the number of scholarships that are going to be awarded. And you'll see our larger schools contribute greater to the percentage. You'll see a school summary from 2011, 2012. And here it reflects the scholarships and the students who receive those scholarships as we go through. And we were pleased to be able to add the early college this year because this was the first graduating class, and we think that's a great beginning for scholarships. Our next slide looks at race, and this is an area we want to continue to look at because quite often when you look at scholarships, you'll find certain groups of folks are neglected in the receipt of scholarships. And we're pleased to see that we're seeing growth in each of our areas, but feel our data needs to look now to see how these populations are reflected in our overall population of our schools to see how we truly are growing there. And I think the slide that I'd like to say, we as the different schools and so forth, I was so pleased with this slide because this reflects the graduating seniors that we've had from 2010 through 2013 and the percentage of seniors that are receiving scholarships. And this begins to look at an unduplicated scholarship count because prior to this, out of the number we had, you have some students who will receive or will be awarded multiple scholarships. And at this time, we're looking at a growth up to 23.5% of our senior population receiving scholarships. And it's a slow growth, but it's steady growth, and we're pleased to report that. And so as I pull that together, we feel like, from the high school perspective, a lot of work has happened. We feel like we have a lot of things to celebrate. And we think, first, I would salute the high school counselors, because I think the group has worked very, very hard to put scholarships out there. And there's a lead at each school that takes that responsibility and then is assisted by the rest of the staff. At the same time, while they put that out there through senior notes, any announcements they can make, we still have students who do not treat scholarships as seriously as their parents wish they would. So we've introduced college foundation nights twice a year now, and our attendance at the financial aid nights are growing. We'll have one coming up in October, and then we'll have another one in January, which really breaks down college expenses. It's probably the first realistic money conversation many of our parents are having. And that in itself has created a lot more interest among some students in looking for scholarships. We do have to learn to counter some fears. We have families reporting the scholarships have been awarded. Still looking at the calls for some of those with fear that some scholarships may not be awarded if someone finds out their child has another. So again, in our communication strategies, we've got to work at that. So one of the focus of our professional learning communities actually in September for our high school group, we'll be taking a look at our scholarship report, looking at our best practices. How can we improve? How are we so successful at some places and some places we're not as successful? I can guarantee you if you look across the course of 10 years, you will find every school runs just like this with their scholarships. A lot depends on your graduating class. A lot depends on the need of the families. And sometimes it's not all school. You know, we can keep putting it out there, but we need our community to receive that. Plus, we need to continue to work hard for local scholarships and make sure that those are awarded, as we've had conversations year after year. Ms. Carpenter will tell me, because I think every year she talks to me about a local scholarship and how it's awarded. But I conclude tonight's report to say this is our beginning, but this is another piece of data that we use at the high school to look to see how can we continue to improve it, and also how can we stabilize it so that we don't see those marked trends that some districts face. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. That's an excellent report, full of good reports tonight. Board members, do you have any comments or questions? Mr. Shoemaker, we'll start with you.
Well, it looks like about 2 scholarships per person who receives a scholarship, the way this is averaging out. Do we have situations where students receive more scholarship money than they could ever actually use at the institution, or multiple sources? And what happens in those cases?
What we do through Scholarship Plus, we report everyone that's awarded. But the examples of that would be students who receive 2 full rides at competing universities. They have to make a choice. And so therefore they don't always accept the highest value. It's been interesting to watch that. So we continue to keep that data because after all it was an award. And we revised, particularly you look at what's been received but also what's been awarded.
All right, so the number that we see is the awarded number,
Awarded
not the
scholarship.
accepted number.
Exactly.
No, what we actually truly accepted. But
Right.
okay, thank you.
Which is a big change in our philosophy because prior to Scholarship Plus, we did only those that were received.
Okay.
And so our scholarship dollars look very low.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. Ms. Carpenter.
Question. When you were talking about those nights in October, is that just for when the parents come? I mean, can these people that give scholarships, can they come to those meetings and say, hey, I got money I want to give away? I'm just curious because I'm still wanting to get, I serve on 2 scholarship committees and I'm wanting to give that money away. And we still have trouble trying to give that money away. And I'm curious because, I mean, we put it in the paper and I still take that thing to the schools and everything, but still we're trying to give it away. And I didn't know if the schools had nights where these organizations could come and when the parents are there, I want to tell them I've got that money and I want to give it away. But is it open to organizations or is it just, what is it?
It is open to the general public. Now, we can go ahead and approach our representatives from the College Foundation and ask about that because there is a gathering time prior to the program starting where parents are seeking information and they're picking up anything that's there that's available. And we've looked at senior notes and a combination of other things to make sure that they're fully aware. But as far as on the program presentations for scholarships, we've not gone that route because we were trying to do a program that would help them understand the full funding of a college education. But we can
But I mean, if it's out
prior to
there,
the
I mean,
program
I
starting.
would be more than happy to
I'll
have
make a
my
note of
stuff
that.
to lay it out there. I mean, I don't have to, but I mean, if they're there and they'll pick it up, that's
I'll
fine.
make a note of that.
Oh,
Let you
okay.
know when we're
All
having
right,
those
thank
nights.
you.
Thank you, Ms. Carpenter. Mr. Kiger.
Yes, thank you very much, Donna, for the good report. I'm going to make this very, very brief, but I want to point the attention to any young prospective student athlete out there who maybe thinks that they don't need to study because they're good in sports and they're going to get an athletic scholarship. On your slide, 62 athletic scholarships were given, that's fantastic, for a dollar amount of $1,396,000. Well, you break that down, that's $22,000 per scholarship, which sounds like a lot of money till you look at it on a per semester basis. It's only $2,800.
Yes.
As somebody who just wrote his very first check to a 4-year university, I can assure you $2,800 doesn't go very far. So the number above that, 917, the odds are in your favor that you're going to get more of an academic scholarship than athletic. And I hope you get both. Whoever you are out there, I hope you get both. But please, please, please do not neglect your studies thinking that you're just going to walk onto a college and have somebody pay it for you. Pay you for attending that school because the odds are just not there. So take your studies seriously, work hard and study, and then if you get to play sports, that's even better. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm glad you brought that up because that is one number we're still calculating because what we do have, and that's always a high number of the number of athletes who receive academic scholarships. And that's something that we post in addition to this. We just haven't got all the confirmation of student athletes yet, because usually they're much more than the general population in our academic area. We'll have that number, and I hope it's going to be high. But thank you for encouraging our public to study and achieve.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about anyway. Athletics is very, very, very important, but we got to get the education part down first, you know. Okay, Mr. Kiger, excellent comments. Mr. Walter?
I agree. It's definitely worth celebrating. $27.5 million of scholarships for our kids here in Cabarrus County. That's excellent. And that's definitely worth almost 1,000 scholarships. That's wonderful news. And I see this. I had some questions. Again, this is kind of new to me, so I'm learning about this program. I appreciate your response. The one thing that I give you a chance to follow up on is there's one school there that's, I guess, going against the trend for 2 years in a row. You want to address that just a little bit?
I'll be glad to. Going back in, trying to think how to word this. Going back through the last 8 years of scholarship reporting, that particular school has peaked and come back down. And where that school is actually where they were prior to 2 extremely high years. The success of those extremely 2 high years was of an employee who zealously went out in the hallways and pulled in students and said, I need to tell you about scholarships. And then routinely went back to make sure that they had applied. Because at the high school, we try to make sure we make them aware, and hopefully they're going to be responsible to the point of completing that scholarship. In this particular site, the person went out, and when they had not applied, she pulled back the application and said, you will fill it out now. And then also posted a bulletin board. She was very persistent. Unfortunately, health problems prevented her from being able to serve in that full capacity this year, and so the total went down. We do attribute it partway to that. The other thing, we had some zealous academic years in between there too. But
need
that's
to
part of the
duplicate
data.
that person.
I'm sorry.
We need to duplicate that person.
We'll clone her. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. Mr. Harrison?
I recall back in the spring, I go home every day and I check my email, and I know there were no fewer than 25 emails, which were really Facebook announcements of, I'm very sure it was Concord High School, hitting that thing time and time again, announcing scholarships that were available. And maybe the other high schools take that approach as well, but as far as a methodology of getting the information out to their children, it makes a good approach to use technology that the children use, that the young people pay attention to, such as Facebook. It'll be something different tomorrow, but for right now, it's that kind of medium through which an announcement can be made, and that makes a good means of communicating to the students the availability of scholarships. And so I guess you have some options there to encourage the other schools to take their best practices and combine their success ratios and how they got the information in front of students, and followed them all the way through to the completion of the application and the form, and supporting them through the whole process, which is overwhelming, which has got to be a very daunting task for a young person who deserves and can compete for the scholarship. But just the sheer paperwork has got to be need a lot of support and encouragement. Thanks a whole lot for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Phillips?
Yes, as someone who has a high school senior this year, I am keenly interested in your presentation. I was very, very pleased to see what I saw. It's just terrific news. A lot of times marketing slogans of organizations ring a little hollow. But if anyone asks me why Cabarrus County schools are the clear choice, this is going to be the first piece of evidence that I give them. Wow. Is that we delivered $27.5 million of scholarships to our seniors last year. Almost 25% of the graduating class got at least one. That's terrific. And I would just say that I wanted to echo what you said about putting together the financial aid nights for parents and students to learn about the process and what may be available. I found that to be very helpful, and my oldest daughter was getting into the college years, and I remember that they told me that when you fill out the FAFSA form, that was a federal application for student aid, that when you push the button and it comes back, it says, "This is your expected family contribution," your reaction will be, "Ah." And filled it out, pushed the button down, I went, "Ah." It's incredible. So you definitely do need to look at all your options, and the other thing you need to do is to go on to www.cfnc, collegefoundationofnorthcarolina.org, and they have a lot of good information there too. So thanks again for terrific work, and to all of your colleagues down the line that contributed to this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Thank all of you board members for the wonderful questions and all. And thank you, Donna. Board members, before we move on into the items for consideration, unless I have any objections, let's move on and take about a 3-minute break, stretch our legs, go to the restroom. Don't forget, come back in about 2-3 minutes, okay?
Is helping me so we have 2 ears listen to what you guys, or 4 ears, excuse me, what we want to change. So I'll try to summarize these. I know Mr. Harrison was present for the committee meeting, as you said earlier, and I'll try to summarize these and then see what questions you guys have. The first 3, which would be 1710, 1720, and 1725, are really related. 1710 primarily just updates some terminology and adds a definition of what gender-based harassment is from the State School Board Association. And then 1720 and 1725, we got a harassment policy that from the State School Board Association about 3 years ago that ultimately combined student harassment and employee harassment in the same policy. And especially over the last couple years, we dealt a lot with confusion in that, where sometimes even when a parent came to you guys to grieve a situation, would cite parts of the policy that were really intended to be what an employee would use, and so it just confused that. And Ms. Stone actually worked very closely on 1720 and 25 to write that policy to separate those two, so she can chime in if she can help with that situation. But those two, there is a little more writing in those than normal. A lot of times we're just updating with the School Board Association, and we in particular, she separated those to make sure those policies were clear. So all 3 of those are really related and primarily terminology and separate employees and students as far as how harassment and bullying is separated. That's a very, very simplistic view of the 3 policies. So if you have any questions about that or anything I can help clear up.
I think Mr. Kiger has a question for you on that.
I do, and I have said this before, that nobody likes a Johnny-come-lately. So I know that Sarah worked hard on it. You guys have I guess there's a couple things. I don't really like the word complaint. I like report better, so I don't really know why I'm on 1720, sorry, okay, and 25 because the same word is used there. So I don't know if we want to get into a big, long, drawn-out discussion about that. And I'll tell you what my problem is, because in the student one, there can be a third student that reports it and says, hey, I've witnessed this onto that person from this person over here, and it's listed as a complaint. So then in your record, it says that you have had a complaint filed against you. Well, to me, complaint's a little different word than, hey, an incident came up that somebody reported. I'm a little uncomfortable with that. The 1725 doesn't have that provision. It's the employee only. And I guess that one may be, I still don't like the word, but at least there's not a third person then involved with making the determination that I've seen somebody do something to you that I think is wrong, and I'm going to go report it, and now there's something officially in that record on that person over there, and then look, I'm over here, I'm kind of out of it. And so, again, I would recommend we pull that one and go back to the committee instead of having a long drawn-out conversation about it here tonight.
And that's on 1720.
That's 17, 20, and 25. I like the fact that we've separated. You are 100% correct that we've had some gray area and some grievance hearings about that. So all of that is fantastic. It's just, I'd just like to wordsmith that one little bit on both of them to make sure we're consistent and we have it the way we want it before we move forward. That's my only request.
Absolutely. May I address a snippet of the history here that I just may be helpful? Chairman Chu?
Absolutely.
Thank you. The original policy that we were operating under was very confusing when you sat down to read it, because it talked about, I am filing a complaint for myself, I'm filing a report for you, for someone I observe, but then it also talked about, at the end, the administrator completes a report. And so we had two different definitions of report and one definition of complaint, and so you had to really parse through the different words to determine, is this the report of me seeing someone else being bullied or harassed, or is this the investigative report that the administrator completes at the end? And so that's why with this version we tried to distinguish the complaint is the starting place and the report is the conclusion. But we can certainly open a thesaurus and try to figure out a better way to define what initially gets brought to the administrator's attention and what is the conclusion the administrator reaches at the end. That's an easy fix.
Thank you, Ms. Stone. I only have just one curiosity, and that is on the policy that we're talking about here, under definitions, complaint. Why didn't we have words? It reads, a complaint is the written notification that a student may be the victim of unlawful discrimination, harassment, or bullying. Then it says all complaints of bullying and harassment shall be made on the CCS bullying harassment complaint form. Why didn't unlawful discrimination be a part of that? Bullying or harassment and unlawful discrimination be in that? Doesn't it need to be there though?
Yeah,
I can address that one.
Okay.
Again, that was, when I was drafting this, an intentional omission, because discrimination is just different from bullying or harassment. And so what we want to do, particularly in the student process here, is we want to make a very streamlined process for students and parents to bring issues of bullying or harassment to the attention of the administrator, because that's what we see the most frequent of, because there's such a heightened awareness of bullying. And because discrimination comes in a different nature, it's typically not student on student when we're seeing situations of discrimination. We've gone ahead and left that open so that if you feel like if you're experiencing discrimination, you just need to go to someone and say, I think this is what's happening, here's the background information. Whereas for the bullying and harassment, because that happens, I hate to say more frequently, but because that's more often what we're looking at in terms of the investigations, we wanted to try to streamline that as easily as possible. I think we have a couple of options. One, we could take the complaint form that Ms. Burns is working on and try to alter it to include discrimination. It's going to kind of require an either-or process on the form. Option two would be to create a separate discrimination reporting form. And option three would be to remove this language from the policy and try to implement it at more of a school-wide level so that students know, we want to make it very easy for students to document complaints of bullying or harassment.
It seems to me like the easier way to do that, Ms. Stone, would be just to add a footnote as to why it's left out. Just a footnote for unlawful discrimination, C, certain policy, certain form. That could be in parentheses or something like that, which that would clarify that, since the title of the policy is discrimination, harassment, and bullying complaint procedure, since it's got all of that in the headline. So actually it would be three options. But the easiest would be to do a footnote. That's what my thoughts are.
Okay. We'll take a look at that and try to come up with something very
Okay.
streamlined.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments on 1720?
Yes.
Mr. Shoemaker, go ahead.
1720.
It's the one where student discrimination, harassment, bullying complaint procedure, and it says complaints may be made anonymously. And in the body of this, you talk about reporting back and letting the student know that the complaint been filled out. You can't do that. There's no closing the loop in this. The other part is you leave it open to a teenager or sub-teen or young to make a false complaint against someone because there's no one to tie it to. So you have this opportunity to have someone investigated, and you don't have any recourse when you find out that maybe this wasn't even a good investigation. So I don't really understand the anonymous piece. It's on the 1725 you talk about anonymous, but you say that can't be used as a way to discipline the employee. You have to find true evidence, not just an anonymous complaint. But in this one, it's kind of open-ended, and I don't like when students are rather immature sometimes in the way they behave and the way they think about their friends. They can use this as a way to inconvenience someone that they don't particularly care for.
I think the simplest answer is that the state law requires you to have a way to report anonymously. And I think it may be some of the stuff that Mr. Cogier was referring to before, like I saw this other student and I want to make sure that we have a way to get that information where you don't necessarily have a repercussion for telling on somebody or whatever. And the other response would be just to say that dealing with 16, 17-year-olds, 14-year-olds, you're always kind of dealing with that, how you put that together and what you have to verify. So in this case, the overarching thing is that the state law says we have to have a way to do that anonymously.
So what is your in the process you have an anonymous complaint? How do you verify it? Because it's just literally a piece of paper with some information on it, but in an employee you're looking for witnesses. A couple people to verify that this is actually going on. Is that how you'll perform the investigation?
Yeah, I think most of the time, again, it happens in other ways. The principal gets an anonymous phone call, say, hey, I want you to just check something out at the football field, et cetera, and they do that to the level that they think that's responsible, and sometimes they determine that that's legitimate and it's not. But it certainly sends people down a path sometimes that gets to where we want to get to. And so They usually have to take that. They don't treat that as the same way that you do with a very specific call, but it's something that, again, sometimes send them down the right path, and then that opens up a door to find out something's going on that they want to put a stop to.
Okay. Any other questions on 1720? Mr. Walter? While you're looking, go ahead, Mr. Harrison, while you're looking.
Just the use of the word perpetrator. Boy, that's a harsh term, and it maybe is already required by state law or the school board association, but I'm not sure how someone can be an alleged perpetrator. And with all due respect to the law, of which you are an expert, someone who is a perpetrator of discrimination or bullying, come on. I mean, bullying and harassment are bad, terrible, awful things, but a perpetrator is someone who perpetrated an act of violence. To me, it seems like an unduly harsh term, if there is any leeway there. And it also sounds like they're guilty before they're charged. It sounds like they're already guilty before the process has been initiated. And there is an accuser, and there is an accused, and there is a process by which their encounter needs to be reviewed objectively to determine whether or not some wrong actually was done. And I don't even have a law degree, but that's generally where I'm coming from regarding that. Just that it seems inappropriate and unduly harsh, if we have any wiggle room on that. And that would be in the, at least in 1720 and 1725, use that phrase, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Now, Mr. Walter.
Yeah, my concern here was the definition of investigator. it doesn't say up on number 6 what the invested says school official responsible. It could be more than one person apparently, because it down later it says it's a principal or designee or coordination with Title 9, ADA, or 504 coordinators. So you might want to define that a little bit better.
Define number 6, is that what you're define number 8?
Define who the investigator or investigators are.
Is that something that we can take back to, obviously, they got to all go back to the policy council anyway, to review for whatever before they come back on the second reading. So is that something that you might can incorporate? And
Yeah, usually the policy committee meets before the first reading. If there are things that we need to take back and say, hey, we're going to bump this back till we have another meeting to bring back, we can do that. It just depends. Some things, coming up with another word, as Ms. Stone mentioned before, is pretty simple. We can send to you, but if you think there's a problem and say, yeah, we want you to take that back to the committee, then we'll do that.
okay, well, I think this what Mr. Walter was referring to can be fixed without that,
Right.
without going back. I think everything so far has been.
Right.
Okay, are there any other comments on
I have-
1720?
I had one on 1720, and this, just in the part that is scratched out as filing a complaint, it says any student can submit the bullying form. Okay, for a high school student, that's okay, and maybe even for a middle school student, but, you're getting down to first and second graders. A student is not going to submit a form, and so I think it needs to be made clear in the policy that a parent can do it on behalf of a student, or if a student just wants to make an oral complaint, that the coordinator will help that student document the form. And that's my only comment on either of those two policies.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Dr. Lowder, you can continue.
Okay, and then the next two policies, 1740 and 3740, really 1740 is primarily just changing some wording. It also has one definition, I think, of to say you don't file a grievance if the law kind of trumps that grievance. That's really the biggest change in that one. And then alternative learning program is essentially about the reading in the policy now said that the superintendent does the placing and the superintendent reviews, and it's really changed to superintendent and designee. Those are the biggest changes in those two.
I had some, I don't know if they're concerns or just thoughts on the one about the alternative learning programs. Based on some of the grievances that have come up since I've been on the board, the parents of students who have been referred to the Glenn Center have the impression that they're supposed to be offered an equivalent classroom curriculum program as to what they had at their previous school, and the reality is that we cannot do that. Particularly if it happens to have been a student who was in an accelerated learning program. And I don't know if there's some way to make that clear in this policy that we are not able to guarantee a like-for-like curriculum at these alternative programs. But then kind of separate from that, and you can't go into this policy, but I think we need to, as a board, think about, is there something else we can offer students that are in those kind of situations?
I would just say, again, I don't know if it can be addressed by policy, but there's so many variables in that. It depends on when the student was suspended. Sometimes if it happens in the first 10 days, we can put them in a virtual public school class. All of our high schools at times have let students, they've worked with the students. Let's say there's 2 weeks left in the semester. They work with them to complete the class. So we're always trying to give them the same 4 classes that they had. But as you said, sometimes you're in weightlifting. They don't have weightlifting at the alternative school. It may be advanced PE. So you give them an equivalent. And it just depends on the schedule and what's available. And sometimes, to be honest, the time that they're suspended. It's certainly our intent and what we want, but it just varies depending on probably 5 or 6 different variables that work there. But as you said, every class cannot be guaranteed. It depends.
Right. At least, to avoid any false expectations, we should at least put something in the policy that that explains that.
Right, and we can just do that in one sentence. I think that's an easy fix too.
I had a quick question on section E, B. You said grievance must be filed as soon as possible, but no longer than 20 days. On these other policies that we're reviewing, those days are 30 days. Is there a reason for the 20?
Other than, that's what the committee looked at. I assume that 20 days in school time, usually 5 days is a week, that is a school month. I assume that's where that comes from, but to be honest with you, I don't know where that originated. That's my best guess.
Okay, it just didn't look consistent with some of the other things that we've got in here.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. Any other questions on this side? Okay, Dr. Lau, you can continue.
And the last committee is community use of facilities. My understanding on this one is we were trying to make sure that we gave the same access to all groups. There were some situations where one group may have had an advantage over another. We wanted to make sure that we have the same open access for that. And also to, I think some of the two major changes was to offer a discount for, let's see exactly how it's worded. Where's the discount? Yeah, nonprofits receive a 25% discount, and nonprofit youth organizations would be 50%. So I think it's a matter of saying everybody needs to fill out the form. We want to be consistent and give access to everybody. And in these two groups, we want to make sure that we're showing, we're encouraging those groups to use our facilities.
Thank you, Dr. Louder. Any questions on 5030? Mr. Harrison?
Was this the policy that dealt, at least generally, with the scouting organizations, or was that a different policy?
Yeah, I think this is one of the ones that originated with, yes.
Okay, as one of many groups.
Yes.
But this does allow access under these terms.
Yes.
Okay,
Equal access.
great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Any further questions?
I have
Walter?
several issues with this. Could we refer that back to the policy committee?
You want to refer 5030 back to the policy?
Yes, I had several issues with it. I don't know if you want to go through those, but we can. I've sent you an email on what those were. Do you want to?
It's a pleasure of the board to take 5030 and send it back to the policy council. We can do that, policy committee. Okay, Mr. Harrison, do you have any questions, comments, any further? Mr. Phillips, you clear?
I was just going to say, I'd like to make sure that with a 50% discount that we're at least covering our cost of if we have to have a custodian come in after hours. I don't want to be in a position where we're going to be taxing our budget because we're offering somebody a 50% discount.
We built the fee structure so that we were in the same position that we were before. The fees were slightly higher just because we've not adjusted them in the last couple of years. But as we looked at the fee structure and changed it to accommodate the policy, we built in the ability to reduce some areas 50% and some 25% so that we're basically overall in a positive situation from where we would have been this past year. So yes, we would definitely be covering our cost.
Thank you, Ms. Klutz. Any other questions from this side? Okay, all right, now, is it the pleasure of the board that we move all of these items here with the changes that was recommended except for 5030? 5030 is going to go back to the policy committee, but the remainder of these policies will move right on to the consent agenda for the next business meeting, which is on the 12th. Is everybody okay?
Mr. Chairman, I would want 1720 and 1725 to be on the action agenda so we can review the wordsmithing that they're going to do and not be on the consent. I don't think it needs to go all the way back to the committee, but if they can work on it and bring it back.
Well, it'll come back to us on second reading. Is that right?
Yeah, but you said consent.
Well,
I want to be able to
right,
review. I want to be able to review the changes before, and so it'd be on the action.
Okay, that's no problem. Is everybody good with that? So they'll just all go to the action then, just do it like that, and you bring back what we need, and then we'll do it like that. Okay, so that's good for that. Okay, Dr. Louder, we'll go ahead and do the policies on the second reading now.
And again, I think we had discussion on some of these, took them back, and just need to know if there's any questions you have to talk about these moving forward. I think we clarified and answered any of the questions you had the first time we made those changes, so unless you have any questions, those would move forward.
Thank you, Dr. Louder. Any other questions on these policy revisions on second reading? On my right side, any?
Well, the only one, I mean, if you're going to put them on consent, again, the only one I would want to pull off for a vote would be 4,700. The other ones I could go with consent. I would just want 4,700 pulled off for a vote on it.
Okay, any other questions on my left? Okay, so that's what we'll do then. We'll put 4,700 on the action agenda, and the other items will go on the consent agenda for the business meeting on the 12th. Okay? Thank you, Dr. Louder, for
Thank you very
bringing
much.
these to us and all the work that you're doing on the policy committee there. Thank you, too, Ms. Burns, for being here with us. All right, board members, we're going to move on now. 5.03, we're going to have Mr. Wicke to come to the podium and talk to us about the camera system bids, and when he gets there, we'll get started.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things have changed since you last looked at this. We've revised the document to reflect the fact that we have a bid date now of August 12th. The reason that occurred was in talking with the consultant last week, Friday, it turned out that we had basically two qualified bidders. We had three to start with, so it looked like things were moving along in the direction that we hoped for. And at the last minute, one of the three qualified bidders, qualified, when I say qualified, is they had the ability to meet certain experience levels, which is not unusual to ask for experience when having someone bid a project of this size. And so we did ask that prior to the bids, and we received responses from three qualified firms. And of those three, one at the very last moment decided it would not be able to put a bid in, could not meet the bid date. They had other challenges that precluded them from doing that. So with that sort of problem staring us in the face, we spoke with Ken Michael of attorneys, and Ken recommended that we re-advertise the bid and review and basically reduce or expand the ability for people to participate in the bid. So we went from, I think it was 5 projects of $500,000 down to 5 projects of $200,000, and hoping that we would get at least a third bidder, if not many more bidders. So we did, in fact, put an ad in the newspaper yesterday, and we have a pre-bid meeting with whoever chooses to show up this week, and we look forward to receiving bids next week, Monday, prior to the meeting, the business meeting, of the board. So we plan on having results, and hopefully solid results to present to you.
Well, with that being said, there's not really much more we can say because we can't talk about something we don't know what we're talking about.
Correct.
So the
Yes,
best
sir.
thing for us to do is move this on to the action agenda, and then when we come back next Monday for our meeting, you'll have all the bids calculated, certified, and all that. Then we'll have something to talk about.
Exactly.
And then we can move it from there. So it'll go to the action agenda.
That'd be fine.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wicke. And
Thank
I
you.
believe, let's see, you've got something else coming up here. Let me look. Yeah, we got to do the request for the DOT on the Harrisburg Elementary. So if you want to go ahead and continue on that.
Yes, sir. I think the best thing to do is just to bring up, yes, thank you, Mike. This is the basic idea that the DOT has presented. And it's been vetted, if you will, with representatives from the town of Harrisburg, their Parks Department, our county administrative staff, and our office. And though these colors are horrible on here, the best thing I can suggest saying is there currently is a road, and let me first describe what you're looking at. To the far upper right is the Harrisburg Elementary School. Sort of in the middle of the slide are the baseball athletic fields that we share with the Parks Department, but remain on our property. There's 4 baseball diamonds there. And then there's a series of 2 other diamonds, basketball courts and all, on the lower portion, center of the screen, thank you, that represents the Park District's properties. And so we have a very good relationship with Harrisburg Town of, and we maintain our properties individually, but we work together to utilize those properties. The difficulty is that as the high-speed rail comes into play in the very near future, The railroad, that is, if I can move this, yeah, railroad is running right through here, and these purple lines define its right-of-way. That's going to become high-speed, and the properties that are sort of up in this area, there's 4 lots and I believe 3 homes, are owned and currently get across the railroad tracks via a private lane, if you will, going across the tracks. That will be closed with the construction of the high-speed rail. So the railroad has proposed that they would construct a road, pay for and construct a road that would come off of the property and then run behind our property in this fashion and so forth down onto Stallings Road and connect there. It'll be a private driveway. It will be accessible to us and to the county and to the town of Harrisburg staff, because the Harrisburg staff, of course, maintains their property. And it, in effect, won't be something that the public gets to use. It'll be chained off and locked. And it would be used by us only in emergency, really. We're looking at and have talked with the DOT about a connection right at this point to allow our buses to exit the site in the case of an emergency. And that emergency would be that right now we only have one way in and out of the site. If a severe accident occurs in front of that drive, if something else happens on the driveway itself that we can't move buses through that area, we would like to be able to move them down this private drive and get them out back down to Stallings Road. And so that's part of the discussion. What I'm really asking for today is not approval of any of this, but just simply the agreement of the board that we can tell the DOT that once the design is finalized and all the agreement information is before us, that the board would be willing to enter into allowing an easement to be placed on our property to allow this driveway to be constructed. And I just basically need a nod of your heads at this point to do that. So I'll be happy to entertain questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wicke. I don't know whether we need to ask questions on this at this point or not. I know what you're asking, but I know Mr. Walters had sent quite a few questions in reference to this, and I had some questions also. You know, the railway is going to be doing the road.
Yes,
and
sir.
some of the things that I'm not sure about are who's going to be responsible for locking the gate? Who's going to have the keys? Who's going to have access? Because the intent of this, to my understanding, is to give the homeowners there that's landlocked another entrance, or the only entrance.
The only entrance.
Well,
Yes, sir.
who's going to be locking the door when they come in, when they go out, and all that?
It's up to them to lock the door. You know, and that's, or it is their private driveway. It certainly, if it were open and one of our vans ran by, or you know, one of our workers were there, if the town is there, if the county, you know, we're going to lock the gate. That's what we do. That's part of our routine. So I don't. There will be a very limited number of keys. There'll be a locked box for the fire department. Again, very standard routine for how we do our schools. It would be the same thing here. So, and I will say that this is not a design. This is nowhere near a design. This is simply an idea that the DOT is suggesting. The design will happen after I send a letter saying, yes, our board is willing to look at the design or to authorize the design to be done with the idea that an easement would be granted pending approval of the design.
Will you be able to give to the railway our concerns so they can incorporate that? Because all I see here at this point is a lot of unanswered questions as far as who's responsible, who does this, who does that. And it could really drag this project on and on and on, simply because if we wait, say, yeah, we go ahead and do something, then it comes back to us and we look at it and say, well, what about all these things here? And I think that maybe we might want to incorporate some of those board suggestions or concerns initially with the railway, so that stuff can be incorporated with whatever they bring to us. It will expedite getting it done, in my opinion.
That's fine.
Does that make, I mean, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Wicke? I don't want to speak on behalf of the board on this, because I feel like, yes, we want to do what we need to do here, but we want to make sure what we're doing is clear in everybody's mind, so we don't go out there and we got ball games going on and there's cars parked all along that road right there. And for all we know, somebody might charge parking and park on those roads so they can just go right to the ball game. I mean, there's all kind of variables there that could come into play. And then part of the intent to have fire and rescue access to those homeowners back there, and then those roads are blocked because somebody forgot to lock the gate, somebody forgot to do this or that, and then who's liable? If it's a private road and we gave them the right of way, are they going to come back on us and say, well, you should have thought about that before? And so you understand some of the concerns that I have. I'd like to give the board just a few minutes, because we still got to move along, but give the board a few minutes to maybe express their concerns, because I know Mr. Walters has some, and then, what those concerns are can possibly be addressed with the railway initially. So with that being said, let's start on Mr. Shoemaker's side, and let's try to be specific, point blank, so we can move along. Thank you. No question, Mr. Shoemaker? Okay, Ms. Carpenter.
Yeah, one of mine is, could they, if we said no, could they still come back and say, well, too bad, I'm going to take it anyway? Could they do that? Legal? My question is whether they could just condemn it, take it anyway. If they wanted to.
Well, in my
They
opinion,
would be
It's
the
actually
railroad?
It's railroad department of the Department of
Transportation.
Transportation. Yeah, it's not the railroad that's
Right, yeah, and
Actually, the
NCDOT
doer
to
of
support the railroad.
yeah, correct.
I mean, I'm just wondering
Yeah,
if they could.
I don't know
Because,
offhand.
a lot of times, like with us, if we're trying to build a school, we can condemn property and then we could, and put the money there, and then if we have to go to court, we can. If we're trying to build a school, well, could these people condemn the property and go ahead and take it and do it? That's my question. Could they do it with it being DOT or whatever? Could they condemn it and go ahead and do it, whether we wanted them to or not? That's my question. Could they do it for if it's the railway? I mean, because I look at this and you say, ooh, railroad's going to go through there. My first thought is, oh, mine, and Lynn's talking about cars parking there, or I see it a ball field, and then my first thing is, I think of safety. I think of train derailment. I think of disaster, and I think of schools. I think of things that could happen. And, what if evacuation has to be done? What if this? What if that? But I'm saying, could they take it if we didn't do it?
Generally speaking, yes, NCDOT does have rights of eminent domain, just as the school board does. How exactly that plays out with respect to school property, I'd have to look at that more.
And that's one
big
thing
picture
I would
yes,
want
they have
to know.
eminent domain just as we do.
another thing, is there any other options other than this? Is this the only option they had?
No, Mr. Chairman, we actually said no to the previous option, and that was, if I can show you, the option was to create a roadway through here and then to allow the residents to use our exit path out to Stallings Road.
No, we wouldn't want to, I'm sure we wouldn't want to do
We
that.
said no to that, so.
I'm sure of that. But I think all in all, though, I'm certain that we want to be a good neighbor to those people. There's no question about that. Just want to make sure that Cabarrus County Schools is protected then and in the future. Because the high-speed railroad, when it's there, it's going to be there long after we're all gone. And that's going to still be there. And I just want to make sure that it's done right in the very beginning, and not sort of being pushed into doing something till we know all the variables. So with that being said, Mr. Kiger, you have any further comments? Or
I do. In my opinion, move forward. It's just they want an easement. So we're going to grant them the easement, at least for planning purposes, so that the railroad department of transportation can work out with the homeowner those little details of who's doing what while they use the easement that we granted. That's all they want from us, is the easement to put the road on top of property that we own. So in my opinion, by all means, proceed with that in mind, and they know that they've got to please. I mean, proceed, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Well,
couldn't quite get that.
well, I agree with what you're saying, Mr. Kiger. There's no questions about what you're saying there. But you got 3 homeowners. This is going to be their primary way of getting to their homes. And, it does have an impact on Cabarrus County there of the school system simply because of the ball fields there. It's right on the edge of the ball fields. It does have impact, and we just need to make sure that we're well covered. And to me, it looks like it could be moved over to the left some there, but I see that one house there, but they could maybe go straighter or something there and get away from them ball fields.
And Mr. Chairman, those fields aren't really used by the school. There's fields on the other side that aren't on the photo that the school uses for PE. The fields that we're looking at here are used by the Parks and Rec Department on Saturdays and whatnot. So there's really not an impact. I suppose it's possible they walk out there and do something during the day, but they didn't when my kids went to school there. There's fields behind the school that aren't on here. So again, it's up to the railroad and Department of Transportation to work out the details with the owner of the property, because they're the ones that they're closing the crossing and removing the means of ingress and egress off of their property. So again, those details have to be worked out by the railroad and those property owners, asking us for the easement. When those details come back in the easement, if we don't like it, well, then we can bark about it. I don't think there's any reason to hold it up. It is prudent if we've got, if there's 2 or 3 things that the board says, hey, well, let's watch out for this. By all means, tell them up front so they're not spinning their wheels. But there's no reason to hold it up at this point. We need, I think we need to just move forward.
No, there's no intention to hold it up. I just want to make sure our concerns are incorporated in this in the beginning so they won't bring it back to us and we'll say, well, why didn't we do all this before? And then they got to go back and do it all over again. Now, that to me makes perfect sense.
Mr. Chairman, it is a government agency, so
Well,
I'm fully
I
prepared
know.
to be able to ask, wonder why they did something a certain way when it comes back to
Well,
us.
they're going to take good old sweet time anyway, but don't let our board be the holdup on it. That's my opinion. Let's get what we got to say to them, and then they'll give them something to work with, and they bring it back to us. And if it incorporated our concerns, hey, no problem. We give them the okay and say, go do it. Okay, Mr. Walter, you have any comments?
Yeah, I had a little bit of a different opinion on all that. But you've got 3 houses here that the railroad has the option to condemn those houses and take those houses, but they're trying to work with these property owners to give them another access. I mean, I think it's nuts that they put a gate there to get back in and out to their house. I don't think that's terribly effective. But basically, we're being asked to use our property for no compensation back for an easement there. They're tearing down trees. They're creating a hazard, as I see it, basically a security risk, possibly behind those fields. I don't know how often it's used, but there's a lot of trees that are going to be torn down. That's an aesthetic and a noise issue. Having people park out there is a safety and a trash issue. And if I was going to grant something like that, I'd like them to improve the property some way and maybe work with the Parks Department to put a sidewalk all the way around it so people can use that facility more as maybe a walking trail or something else. But anyway, I don't think we should just give them the right to just cross the property for no compensation. I guess the other option, they could try to condemn and get an access, but again, you can negotiate during that time. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. And that's pretty much in a nutshell what I was saying. There is these concerns, and Mr. Wickey's making notes of all this. And so when he does convey our meeting results tonight over to them, hopefully they'll take all that into consideration and come back with the plan. Mr. Harrison.
Well, I like to think that I am a good neighbor to this group because I could walk down to this area if I decided to hike it down Stallings Road from my residence. So I take it that the granting of this easement has no financial bearing on us.
That's correct.
Okay, at least I understand that amount.
I mean, we wouldn't be paying for anything that needs to be done.
No, we would have no financial exchange. Right. We would be losing the little bit of land in some sense.
It's unused at the moment.
Correct.
It's really probably about 15 or 20 feet beyond the fence of the baseball fields, and
so it's immaterial to us. Is it? I'm trying to ask a question whether or not the North Carolina Department of Transportation builds this road for these residents before or after they make the other accommodations for the high-speed rail. It doesn't affect us per se, does it?
No, I think they're certainly trying to accomplish it before the high-speed rail is constructed.
Okay. Just as long as neither party could come back to the school asking us, the school system, asking us to be involved with additional accommodations or rearrangements, because there will be tremendous changes to that entire area as the high-speed rail comes through. I guess I'm trying to say, if we grant the easement, I hope that we grant it and then are not a party to future needs specific to this, in effect, this long driveway for these residents here who have to have some means in and out.
Right.
But after that point, I hope we have no further, at least financial involvement.
I will say, and there was a question raised by one of the board, the maintenance, at least as it's currently written, drawn, however you want to say it, is planned to be done by the homeowners. So it's not something that the town of Harrisburg is picking up. It's not something that is our responsibility. It's really the homeowner's responsibility to maintain it. And I'll leave it at that.
Is it going to be a paved or a dirt road?
It's a gravel road.
Graveled road?
Yes.
Then see that
It'll be partially paved coming in, because that's what the Park District wants, and that's really what they have currently, is a partial pavement, and then, once you get inside the property, then it would be gravel.
And then see, that even creates another issue which needs to be looked at, and that's the dust.
Mhm.
The dust from the cars coming in and out. You're saying that probably won't be a lot, but you take 3 houses, 2 or 3 cars each, friends, relatives, and whoever else wants to go up and down the road because somebody forgot to lock it. It could really be, a pretty significant issue. Mr. Phillips, you have any concern?
Not really any concerns that haven't already been addressed. I would definitely want to have the right to have the emergency access, and I think that this is basically providing a economic benefit to private parties, and so therefore the school should be compensated for the use of the land.
Any further questions or comments from the board? Is everybody good for the consent agenda? Everybody okay with consent? To give them the okay, and then they'll bring it back to us, and you'll incorporate all this with it when you talk to them?
Yes.
Okay.
And if you like, I'd be happy to run the a draft of my letter through the Construction Liaison Committee.
Absolutely, yeah, that would be fine.
Okay.
I've got a lot of confidence in our group. They've heard all the discussion from the board
Right.
concerns, and so we can somehow incorporate all that. We good to go.
Sounds great.
Thank you, Mr. Twicky. I think you
Thank
just
you.
need to hang on there because you got some more stuff here.
Yeah. Yes, I do.
We've got 5.5, the Revised Conservation Easement with MMI.
Yes, and I think the easiest way to explain this is that Mark Enriquez, if you recall, was given responsibility to review this and to see what could be done with it. I know that Mark did have a conference call with the attorney from MMI, and they have revised the language specifically. I was told to look at Section 9 of the document. So, Mike, if you can take us to Section 9. Right there, oops, one right there. With the yellow on it, it basically is referring to what I think was the crux of the issue with regard to this particular agreement, was the ownership and duration of it. And in effect, what Mark is saying now is that basically MMI has agreed that the transfer will occur by a date specific. So in other words, though they have to, in effect, retain, if you will, ownership to demonstrate to the government and all the entities that they are responsible for and maintaining the easement and maintaining the shoreline for this period of time. Once it gets to January 1st of 2018, that ownership of that easement is returned to the county's water and soil and water, district. for future maintenance. It's no different than what we've done at the new Odell School and also Cox Mill Elementary School. So.
Thank you, Mr. Whitkey, and it's working just fine with them. So
Yes,
I think
yes,
with these revisions here, I think we've got a very reasonable agreement with them. I'd like to give the board opportunity to ask questions again. We'll start on Mr. Phillips' side. If you have questions about the agreement with Mogeson. Everybody good? You good, Mr. Phillips? Mr. Harris? Okay. Mr. Walter? You okay? Mr. Kiger?
Yep.
Ms. Carpenter?
The only question I have, this is near where that road's going to be. What's that going to do there? Now, that's my only question. I want to make sure that's not going to hold up or disturb that road that we're building there. I just want to make absolutely positively no questions asked.
That may be a question, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that may be a question for Mark, because that was something that specifically came up here before he went back to negotiate, just to make sure that that was
I want to
taken
make
into
sure
account.
because I know they're in the final stages and they were supposed to be putting this thing out to bid.
No, if I can just respond, Dennis Testerman, who represents the county's conservation district, has been involved in these meetings with staff and the engineers hired by the county. There's discussion about how Dennis and his group want to use this easement area. There's discussion about possibly a walking trail in the future. The engineering firm knows well in advance that this is going to take place. I don't think that it'll happen when MMI is doing this work. They're basically just going to, in effect, sustain the shoreline, if you will, of the river. But eventually, given how the district's grants process work, I suspect you'll be seeing a grant request to put in a walkway along that area. And the bridge design is to take into account somebody reaching that point, walking up, crossing the road, going back down on the other side. That has all been discussed with the engineers in the early planning stages, and it will be continued to be discussed as we move forward.
Don't think it's going to mess it. I just want to make sure it's not going to mess it up or stop it or them say,
Jonathan
"Ooh,
Marshall is in charge of that project, and he's well aware of what the district needs, and he was the first to bring that up with the engineers, as a matter of fact, during our discussions and design. So.
Okay, because I don't want to approve something and then them chain themselves to a tree or something and say you can't do it.
No.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay, you good, Ms. Carpenter? You good with your answer? Okay, Mr. Shoemaker, you have any comments? Okay, board members, where are we at on this, board members? We going straight to the consent agenda?
Yes.
Everybody good with consent? Okay, Mr. Whitkey.
Thank you very
We got consent
much.
on that one, and it looks like your last item for tonight is the construction bids for the Education Center Emergency Generator, 5.6.
Yes, sir. And I apologize because I think we still have yellow marks all over the place. And we do have the bids in. The way this turned out, the low bid is by Henson Electric. What we did not have specifically specified was the fact that we want load testing to be done on the generator once it's complete. And we have a price from Henson for that work, and that price is an additional $605 in addition to their bid. The second lowest bidder, Premium Power, did provide it or includes it as a normal part of their process, and so their price stands at $43,995. So the low bidder is still Henson at $43,132, and that is the firm to which we would like to award this and get us an emergency generator.
Well, it'd be about time, won't it? They've
Yes.
been out here all these years and hadn't had anything for backup, so that's a good thing. Board members, do you have any questions about the generator for the Ed Center? Mr. Shoemaker?
No question.
Ms. Carpenter? Mr. Kiger?
Nope.
Mr. Walter? Mr. Harrison? Mr. Phillips?
What fuel will the generator use?
It's a, I want to say a gas-fueled device. Normally, we have a dual fuel, and typically it's, and I have to apologize because I'm not used to what we do in this particular part of the country. Historically, it's been gas and oil. I believe that's what we're doing in most of these generators for the school district. I can certainly verify that for you.
Okay, I was just
Yeah, no, it's
kind of curious, and sometimes you have to watch because if there's a loss of power, you may not be able to get things like a fuel pump going if you don't have electricity.
I would think it'd be diesel and diesel gas and, and oil.
Yeah.
And, but I can certainly confirm that.
Okay.
Now, I would say it would be diesel too, more than likely. So,
Yeah.
all right, looks like we got consent agenda on that, so that's good, Mr. Wiki. So
Thank you
you've
very
got
much.
that, and so you guys can tell them they can get started, I guess.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, board members, this next item here is 5.07. This is the Cabarrus Soil and Water Conservation District 50th Anniversary Proclamation. You've had this before you. Dennis Testerman, the director for the Soil and Water, asked us if we would designate, starting on August the 28th, as the Cabarrus Soil and Water Conservation District 50th Anniversary Proclamation. And does anybody have any comments or questions about this? I felt like that, 50 years of soil and water conservation in Cabarrus County has definitely got a lot of merit, and I think it needs to be recognized. And so, does anybody have any comments or questions, or are we going to go right on to the consent agenda? Consent agenda? Okay, that's where we'll go on that. All right, and then our next item, 5.8, is another resolution here. Probably 5 or 6 weeks ago, I got an email from North Carolina School Board Association, and what this would do for asking if we had any submissions that we could submit a resolution for nomination of business and nonprofit honor roll. And when I read that, I immediately thought of two of our businesses that have really been a tremendous asset to us for the last several years, in particular Hillblish Ford, and then as of last year, Concord Printing. So what I would like to do is submit a resolution to the North Carolina School Board Association that Hillblish Ford and also Concord Printing Company be recognized and added to this honor roll for nonprofit organizations. And you've had the resolution there. It was a resolution that was recommended by the North Carolina School Board Association, but we would do two of these. And so if you have any comments or questions, we'll address those at this time. I don't really know a lot about this. This is a new thing that they're doing amongst many other things. And but I think it's a great recognition because partnerships with the businesses in Cabarrus County show their concern for what we're doing, their concern for the children, and in these cases, Concord Printing, the Impact Through Education Award that they do monthly for 2 schools monthly, and that's a very nice contribution. And then also Hillblish Ford doing the Teacher of the Month for Cabarrus County schools. They also do that for Kannapolis City schools as well. And so I think that they're very deserving of this. But anyway, if you have comments or questions, we'll take those. Otherwise, we'll move on and go on to the consent.
I just have one.
Yeah.
Is it our intent after this to continue to look at companies that we would want to put on the business honor roll as we go forward throughout the year on a periodic basis, every 2 months, every 3 months, every 4 months or something where we can honor, jobs is an important thing, and also recognition that people that do employ our citizens is an important thing. I don't know if we want to do it every month, but I do think that we should think about doing it on a periodic basis instead of some type of time period so that we can do this.
Absolutely, Mr. Shoemaker. Now, keeping in mind, this would be a North Carolina School Board Association award. It would be provided by them, and I would assume this would be an annual. The letter that I had, and unless Miss Monroe, she read the letter as well as I did, but unless she has anything, more than what I've already said, it'll more than likely just be an annual, add to the honor roll annually.
Chairman Chu,
Yep.
say it could be submitted throughout the year.
Okay, well, that answers that question then. So if we do have other participating businesses and, that type thing, that participate with what we're doing here in Cabarrus County Schools, we could always send in another resolution and ask that they be added to the business honor roll. So, yeah, so I think that would be a good thing. Because I tell you, I want to recognize businesses, and I would like for us to have more community business partnerships. Just like the one with the hospital, Miss Smith, that there, I don't know if the four new board members realize the impact that has in Cabarrus County and the savings that it saved us. And then, these other awards, if we're going to do these things, having support, monetary support behind that is very important. Otherwise, guess what? We got to find the money to do it or quit the program. And I don't want to see us quit the program because it honors and it recognizes people for achievement. And being more than just average, not just blending in, but standing out, and they get something for it, and the community is behind them. And so I don't want to see us lose programs. I want to see us get more people involved. So are there any other discussion on this resolution? Everybody good for the consent agenda? Okay, that's where we're to go. And then we want to keep in mind, that as the year progresses and we have other business and things, let's don't let this die here. Let's try to remember that we have a North Carolina School Board Association honor roll that we can submit that business there. Well, they'll get some recognition. So let's don't forget this as we move on. Okay, so that goes to the consent agenda. Now, let's see, we have Dr. Van Hukelem's going to come and do 5.9, and this is on the Cabarrus County Schools fees. And so, Jason, when you get there, we're ready to crank up on this.
Okay, so here we have our fees. This needs to be approved every year before we start school. We've highlighted here in yellow the changes for this year, and we would like to put this on the consent agenda. Are there any questions?
Board members, you've had a chance to review this. We'll start on Mr. Phillips' side. If you have questions, we'll address those and we'll move on.
Okay. It's a version that you're showing is different than the one I just pulled up. But in any case, the one that really jumped out at me was the graduation gowns. Mm-hmm. That was a fairly substantial increase, and I'm wondering if it wouldn't pay for us to go out and solicit bids to see if there's a cheaper option for our students, because that was close to 100% increase in cost.
Right. And we've historically gone with that company. I don't know what the process would be to... Chris, what's the sign the contract on that?
The last thing that Dr. Sane did before she switched was ultimately to continue that agreement with Jostens, because I think this may be the only thing that they increased and everything else stayed flat. So right now, that's the agreement that we have that was made right before she left to continue to work with Jostens.
Is that an annual thing?
That in the past has been a 3-year agreement, just so they can kind of continue with that. There are some things that are annual, but in the past that's been 3 years that they've continued with that group.
Okay, so is this price locked in then for 3 years? Is that how that works?
Yeah, I think so. That's so they can go ahead and advertise that and put that out for seniors for invitations, rings, all the kind of stuff that's part of that package.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing that I was going to ask about was, as part of my weekend entertainment, I was reading through the state budget, and there was a little piece in there about advanced placement test fees, and to me the language wasn't entirely clear, but it seemed like the intent was we weren't supposed to charge students to take advanced placement tests, but it wasn't clear whether the state was going to give us any money to cover that or not, and so now I see we're charging students for fees. So what's the rule there?
Yeah, historically we've always charged students for fees. We will continue to do that next year. The budget did, since it is a 2-year budget, it looks like we will have some money to cover some of those fees next year in 2014-15. So that is a new. We've never seen that before from the state level. The rough number was, I think, $12 million for 2014 for the state to cover AP and IB exams. So we don't know how that'll be allocated, or whether that's for low-income students or whatever, but we'll wait for further clarification.
Mr. Phillips, you good? Okay, Mr. Harrison?
I'm fine.
Mr. Walden?
Yeah, Mr. Phillips answered pretty much, or addressed the thing about the graduation caps. I mean, that's $13,000 more that our parents and students are going to have to come up with, and that was a significant bump. I would have at least try to go out and see what else is available. But if we're stuck with the contract, we're stuck with the contract.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. Mr. Kiger? Ms. Carpenter?
Well, I'm just
All right,
looking
please.
at this. We know that, excuse me, we know that our instructional supplies have been cut by 50%, and those supplies are going to have to come from somewhere. And I'm just looking, art class is saying supplies, $10. Music, $10. I mean, that's sheet music, and I mean, even copying it. I mean, are we covering our costs to copy it?
Right.
I know I take paper when I go to,
Right.
I mean, and these teachers have not got raises. They don't have the money to pay for it. I mean, let's be realistic about it. I mean, I don't know any teacher that they've been taking money out of their pockets. They don't have the money to take out of their pockets. Let's be realistic about it. I don't know how many teachers I'm hearing now saying, I'm having to quit my job because I can't afford it. I can't teach. I can't afford to teach because they can't take the money out of the pockets. And unfortunately, these parents, we're going to have to step up to the plate to pay these fees. And like I say, $10 for, and it says materials for individual, and it's saying here like for art classes, for supplies, band, for sheet music, things like that, is $10. This is for a whole year?
Correct, yeah. And it's like
Is that realistic?
Well,
I really
right.
don't think it's realistic.
It's a way for us to help supplement some of the other instructional supply money that we have. So we still get instructional supply money. We don't get as much as we used to. It's a way to ease the cost.
50% has been cut out of our things.
Yeah.
I really
And the board-
do not
the-
think
yeah.
that these prices are realistic.
But
I mean,
think we're
we
trying to
all
balance that
have
with
to
all the other costs that parents have to make, and I mean that's the discretion of the board. But these are what we've charged in the past, so anything else would be an increase from that.
And when were the last time these were increased?
I don't have that data. All I have is the last 2 years.
I would like to know when these were increased, these amounts here. I mean, $10 for a whole year, and our instructional fees were decreased by 50%. And then, when was the last time these were decreased?
Do you have any?
Increased.
Carolyn, our instructional supply dollars, we are operating on 50% of the original allotment. That's 50% of the original allotment approximately 3 years ago. We were cut 3 years ago, and then they continued that cut this year. So we're not operating on any less than we were last year, but we are operating on 50%. We were expecting to have those funds returned, and we did not. If you'll recall, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, this board tried to eliminate fees for students. And that was the goal of the board. The fees changed somewhat then. We tried to eliminate fees and reduce fees. Then when we went through the budget cuts, this board then decided you would allow us to do the $10 a year to supplement the instructional supply budget because they were cut, but it's voluntary. We're not mandating that be done. So this board has been very involved in making those decisions as related to our instructional supply and our fee schedule.
How much of that $10 are we actually collecting?
I'll have to get those. I haven't updated those numbers recently, but I certainly can for you.
And if you would, find out when these other ones were, last time those were actually increased.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Carpenter. Mr. Shoemaker, you have comments, questions?
Well, I noticed the highlighted items seem to be the ones that there's some changes on. On the driver's education, I noticed that the state budget actually allowed it for us to increase our stipend for it, since they're not going to, I don't know what they did with it, but I thought that they cut part of theirs, yeah. So you're saying it's $55 state set fee. What is that? I mean, is $55 what we've always charged, or
believe
should
last year-
should we be accommodating since the state's kind of reduced our amount?
Last year was $45, right?
Right. So we're allowed to increase the amount of fee that we charge the student to $55 this year. We're not required to, but otherwise we would have to supplement with local funds, and we do not have the ability to do that. So we've chosen to make a request that you increase it to 55 to.
So this 55 is a $10 increase over what it was last year.
Correct.
Okay. STEM iPad usage, $50. Can you elaborate on what that is? And I don't understand that.
It's a way to. This is only for our STEM students at Central Cabarrus High School. That's the only school so far that we actually issue them a device and say, "This is your device. Take it home. It's yours." They personalize it to some extent. I mean, it's still ours. We own it, but it's theirs. They carry it with them all the time. So this is a way to build in a lot of ownership with those devices and allow us to replace the ones that get lost or broken. And it's kind of our own insurance policy.
So it's just a little Cabarrus County insurance fee.
Right.
All right. That's all I have on this. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, a quick
Yes, Mr.
comment. My conservative friends will be delighted that our students are reading the Federalist Papers. And I know we were talking about fees for that copy, but I can guarantee you that if you contact David in the distribution center of the Heritage Foundation, instead of $5 for their copy of the Federalist Papers, for $1,500, they'll send them to you for 15 cents or 25 cents, or an incredibly low amount, and good, high quality,
Sure.
comprehensive editions of that kind of thing. So we can get it on the purchasing side if we can't get it on the fee side for some of these supplies that we are orchestrating.
Okay.
Please consider that. I mean that very literally.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Are there any other comments from the board on fees? I think that Ms. Carpenter wanted some things looked into, so do you want to go with the consent or with those changes that she has recommended, or just go to the action and we'll just vote on it? Which would you prefer, board?
If we can go to the action, that'd be fine. I just
You mean
like to get
consent?
those things.
Consent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we go to the
You want,
action.
but we can go to action. Okay. Everybody okay with that? It's just one simple vote. Okay, Jason, you got your instructions there?
All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, board members, we got one last item. This is the item that was added by Mr. Phillips. It will be 5.10, and this is the resolution there to our state legislators. And so I'd like to ask Mr. Phillips, if he will, to address the board on this resolution, and then we'll discuss on it and move on.
Okay. Hopefully each of you has a copy of the resolution that I asked Eileen to print up for you. The general purpose of this is that, as Kelly Klutz introduced to us earlier, the budget that just passed from the state has a lot of negative implications for our school district. But it turns out that 3 of our representatives in Raleigh from this county voted against that budget. And I think that they will take a lot of heat from other people for not supporting the budget. And I think that those of us that think that was a good thing that they voted against it should voice our approval. And so that's what the purpose of this resolution is. The first part of it with the whereases is basically just replicating what Kelly said were the primary implications of the budget as it impacts our district. And then now therefore be it resolved that the Cabarrus County Board of Education hereby thanks the following members of the Cabarrus County delegation to the North Carolina General Assembly for their votes against the state budget for the current fiscal year. The Honorable Fletcher Hartzell, State Senator, the Honorable Linda Johnson, State Legislator, and the Honorable Larry Pittman, State Legislator. And then it goes on to give special thanks to Representative Johnson for her leadership efforts to moderate the cuts to the education budget and to teaching assistants in particular. We wish more the General Assembly and the Governor shared her views on this issue. Now, I'm perfectly fine with changing any of this, but I just wanted to put it out there as a general concept and let you react to it.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips, for the presentation. Board members, you got any comments, questions? I think Mr. Harrison said he had maybe a couple little things he wanted to add, so we'll just go ahead and start with you, David.
Does it need a second at this point?
Well, no, what we're going to do is, we've already added it to the agenda. That part's
Correct.
done. All right, all we're going to do now is decide whether we want to accept it as it is and go to the consent agenda, or go to the action agenda with changes that need to be made.
No, I think it's excellent, and I appreciate Dr. Phillips's leadership on this.
So you're okay with consent, okay? Mr. Walter?
I also support it, but I also think if we're into thanking folks, we ought to consider a resolution for the county as well. From what I understand, that they've actually approved, they approved an increase for our teachers, which the state did not. They've, I guess, worked with us more so than they have in the past. I've heard a lot of good things, being this my first time going through this, but that the commissioners had worked with us pretty well this year compared to in the past, and I think that's worthy of being recognized as well.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. I think that'd be a good project for you right there. You can be working on that between now and September. Okay, all right, Mr. Kiger. Ms. Carpenter.
I think, and I think we
Mike,
should
please.
thank them, but one
Mike.
thing. Too, I'd love to send this to our governor, to let him in. One part I'd like to put in there is to say, and if North Carolina is supposed to be supporting job growth, this does not support job growth by laying off people. And I would like to send it to our governor, because this is what it did to our county, and it is not supporting job growth when you're having to lay off people. But I do support it, but I do want to thank our legislators for not supporting it. But I would like a copy of it to go to our governor. But I would support, too, what our commissioners did do, the good things they did. The only thing I do not like is that we didn't get to give raises to all our county staff. It only went to our teachers and not to our custodials or to all our county staff. That's the negative part.
Thank you, Ms. Carpenter. Mr. Shoemaker, you have comments, questions?
Dr. Phillips, I appreciate you taking time to write this, and we do appreciate what our legislators, they stood up, and I know that they were under intense pressure. I talked to Fletcher personally, and he told me that there were several things that he didn't appreciate about the budget, and I know that Linda was very hard working behind the scenes trying to add some sanity into this process. So I'm full support of it, and let's put it on the consent agenda.
Okay, looks like we got consent, so everybody's good on this, and so we'll move it on, 5.10, to go to the consent agenda, and we'll be looking for that resolution until we'll pass it next week and get it sent on out. And in the meantime, Mr. Walter will be working on a resolution for us that we can send the county commission to give them our thanks for working with us like they did this past year, and actually in other years as well. They've done very well. And then if it's the board's pleasure, you want to send a resolution to the governor, that can be fine as well. What's the board's pleasure on that? And if it's the pleasure of the board to do that, then I think since Ms. Carpenter brought it up, she could be the resolution writer on that and bring it back to us in September. Okay. Are you good with that?
What, send one to the governor?
Yeah, bring it back to the board in September, and then we'll look at it and vote on it in September business meeting.
Okay, you gonna trust me to send one to the governor?
No, well, you're going to have to bring it to us first. No, you're going to have to bring it to us. You're going to have to bring it to us first. You might be saying some things in there.
Me and Jeff.
Oh.
If it goes straight to the governor, make sure your name is as big as John Hancock on there, and our names aren't on there.
Okay, all right, let's try to move this on. Board members, I appreciate your the dialogue tonight, good dialogue, made good decisions, I think. And with that being said, it's time for us to end the meeting. And what I'd like to do is call for a motion that we convene in closed session.
So moved.
I I have a motion by Mr. Walter.
Second.
Second, Mr. Harrison. All in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, I'd like to say with that, the meeting is now adjourned. Open session's adjourned at this point, and good night to everybody, and we'll see you back next Monday on the 12th. Okay? Thank you, and good night to our viewing audience.